Well, hi there, and welcome back. Just to let you know that on Friday, it is Remembrance Day. I'll be down at the Cenotaph in Bridgewater, as I have for the last number of years, and we certainly ask folks to do their part to keep memories alive, lest we forget, as they say. It was interesting to see that, because tomorrow is Remembrance Day, that the Nova Scotia legislature sat until close to midnight. It was late in the evening on Wednesday night as things concluded, and the Nova Scotia government put out a news release about 9:23 to say fall legislative session modernizes government, protects Nova Scotians, talking about Nova Scotia Power, putting a bill in place to protect people from increases. We'll still see increases because of fuel. That's another conversation for another time. And the Nova Scotia New Democratic Party issued its own release, Houston Leaves Families Waiting, as fall sitting wraps. And to talk a little bit about this, we have the leader of Nova Scotia's New Democratic Party, and Claudia Chender, the representative for Dartmouth South, joins us. And Claudia Chender, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate this.
Always nice to chat. Good morning.
And it's been a while. So, the first session as leader, it was the summer session, which was a bit of an anomaly. It was about pay raises and increases in remuneration. So how did the fall sitting differ from that for you?
Oh, well, it was really different. I mean, the summer sitting we had was extraordinary and not necessary, in my opinion, as I have mentioned in the past. But this was a full legislative sitting. It would have, if the government had had their way, been extraordinarily short. It ended up being under a month anyway. We don't sit very often here in Nova Scotia because the government has arranged it that way. But there was a lot of legislation that came through, and not very much of the legislation we were hoping for. We are experiencing a rocky road here in Nova Scotia, as we are everywhere else. And as MLAs and as New Democrats, we, are inundated with stories of people who are just trying to make it right now, who are having a hard time accessing healthcare, having a hard time filling their oil tank. And, we were looking for action for those people. We were looking for the government to use the tools that it has to demonstrate that it's doing what it said it was going to do. Tim Houston said he was going to fix healthcare. We know that doesn't happen in a day. But across the board, we are not seeing improvements at all. We're, in fact, seeing things get much worse. And so we were looking for decisive action, and we were left wanting.
So who raised those expectations? I know this government that's in power now said, we will do this, but I'm pretty sure Tim Houston said it might not happen in the first term. It may take us 2 terms. He was setting us up for at least the idea that it was a lot and he was going to spend money to do it. Are you seeing those plans in action?
We are not seeing any progress, Sheldon. So, in that short month that we were sitting, almost 6,500 people were added to the family practice wait list. That's ballooned by an extra 50,000 since this government came to office. It's growing exponentially every month. Surgery wait times are increasing. And crucially, in communities across this province, including yours and mine, the ER situation is terrifying, as well as, the access to and availability of paramedics. So we don't expect things to be fixed overnight. We were skeptical, frankly, of anyone running on a claim that they were going to fix healthcare, although we know that that's what Nova Scotians desperately want. It's a huge project, but things are getting worse and worse. And that's the challenge. And so we feel like decisive action is really needed. We saw it in British Columbia. British Columbia just announced a complete change to the way that family doctors are remunerated. This is the kind of change family physicians have been asking for here for a long time. But we don't have a plan like that here. And so it is a global issue. It's a national issue. But we need to find a way to solve it on behalf of Nova Scotians. And unfortunately, we just don't see progress. And it's very frustrating and it's very painful for the people we represent.
So I could go back to probably 5 or 6 years ago that Doctors Nova Scotia was saying we need to review fee for service. And this is what British Columbia has done. They've essentially put family doctors, GPs, on a salary. And they say, the people who promote that system say it'll help recognize that family doctors are specialists. And that's why the students graduating from medical school and going into practice are picking, especially because the the remuneration is $400,000 instead of $200,000, or those are round numbers. Mm-hmm. But what happens when we start getting into bidding wars? Does it make sense to jump in? I heard one analyst say we're already behind the 8 ball. They're already swimming their laps, and we haven't even put our toe in the water.
Yeah, well, we have a long way to go before we need to think about something like a bidding war. As you say, I think that many folks have pointed out for a long time that a blended capitation model or an alternative payment plan is just a better way to go than fee for service. Many doctors, not all doctors, but many doctors, particularly younger ones, don't want to be small business people. They want to be doctors. And in this province, you also have to run a business, and it's hard. And it's, it's not something you learn how to do in medical school. And so this is something that we have been pushing for a long time. The NDP, of course, brought in collaborative care. You and I have talked about that. Mm-hmm. This is part of the bedrock of collaborative care, that you have a collaborative clinic with lots of different allied health professionals working to their scope so that more people can be attached to primary care, but not everybody has to see that physician. We've been pushing for that. We have legislation on the books for that. The government, in fact, did expand a pilot with Dalhousie Family Medicine just in the past couple of months. We were very happy to see that. It'll take a few thousand people off of that wait list. That is the way that we need to go. Obviously, there are conversations about the remuneration and what we can afford. But, in my own backyard, we had $22 million given to a developer who was already going to build. We have a $25 million tax cut that was pushed through very mysteriously in this session to the Financial Measures Act, which we never look at in the spring. Finance minister won't tell us why or who it's for. So there's lots of choices about how government uses their budget. They have said that they want to spend to fix healthcare, but we don't see that happening, at least not wisely, because we're not seeing improvements. And meanwhile, people are struggling, as I said, just to fill their oil tank or to fill their basket of groceries. And almost every other province has done something to address that for folks in a meaningful way. And again, we haven't really seen that here. And so we're a little bit hard pressed to figure out what the government is up to, other than in this session, consolidating its power. So, Tim Houston got rid of, I think, about a dozen independent boards and put ministers in charge. I laugh when I see that headline that they are modernizing government, because I think that the Houston version of a modern government is circa 1980. We're back to patronage appointments. We're back to rewarding our friends and to kind of, ensuring that if you're a friend of the government, you get the contract and you get the job. And if you're not, beware. I don't think that's how Nova Scotians want to be governed.
And I'm not going to speak on behalf of Tim Houston and his government, but you could see that a conservative approach might be to take ownership and to be a leader and to take responsibility. And perhaps this is what his viewpoint is on this, that he is the one who will be responsible if things go well. Conversely, he's the one who will take the blame if it doesn't. And is it fair, though, to say, a year and a half into this government's mandate that, we're not seeing progress, where this is a global issue, as we've noted, that this is something happening in jurisdictions across Canada, that there's a meeting with the Prime Minister and First Ministers, and they all say, where we are at, we're not getting enough money to do what's needed. Mm-hmm. Does that not make sense in some ways?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So to the first part, yes, that's what Tim Houston says. He says, I'm going to be responsible. But that runs counter to anything anyone will ever tell you about good public policy. It's important to have experts informing the work of government. It's important. You and I were just talking before the show about how hard it is to get people to run. I have no faith that any executive council has the expertise required to single-handedly make huge decisions about how government invests, how government builds, how we treat arts and culture, how we support our agricultural industry. We don't have that. We need that support of Nova Scotians and of the incredible wealth of knowledge and expertise we have here in Nova Scotia. And we are systematically sidelining that knowledge, sidelining that expertise in favor of ministerial decision-making that is often very secretive. So I'll bring us back to my own backyard, Southdale Mount Hope, a very controversial housing development. It was reported in the Chronicle Herald via a tiny little white and black advertisement and in other media outlets this morning that special housing area is now purporting to add hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of units to its original application. No public information, no press release, no consultation, no conversation, nothing. And, that's not how we expect government to be done. We want citizens, Nova Scotians, want to understand what's happening. They deserve to understand what's happening. That's the democratic process. So yes, Tim Houston says that he wants to be held accountable, and he will be. And, maybe they'll push some stuff through. He said yesterday he'll push anyone out of the way who tries to stop him. He said that with a gallery full of people who are opposing Bill 225, the municipal governance bill, on the grounds that it could gravely endanger the future of African Nova Scotian communities across this province. Pretty tone deaf from my perspective, and not really in keeping with what Nova Scotians want. That was the first part of your question. I now can't remember the second part.
The second part was obviously first ministers and asking the federal government for more dollars for healthcare.
We need larger health transfers. There's no question. Right. And I have a lot of respect for our Minister of Health, I should say. I think Michelle Thompson is a healthcare professional and a leader. And I think they're doing hard work, and we support them 100% at that table. Our population is older and less well than almost every other province across the country. Our transfers don't reflect that. So not only are they not high enough to begin with, but they also don't reflect the healthcare needs of our province. So yes, it's incredibly difficult situation, and we need more resources, no question. But we have some, and the decision of this government is how to spend them. And from our perspective, that spending has not happened in the right places.
This issue of inflation, and I know that on the federal level, the opposition is saying, well, this is the direct result of pandemic spending, of a lot of things. But in a global environment, the entire planet is witnessing the same thing. Federally, a new Democratic leader, Jagmeet Singh, is saying, this is profiteering. This is gross profits that are not being taxed appropriately. I don't know whether on the ground that's the same situation, because we're talking about multinationals. Mm-hmm. So where does the NDP in Nova Scotia, where does Claudia Chender advise a government to help find the way to pay for ways or ease the pain that people are feeling?
Well, there are a few really practical things that we have raised. So I should say that the finance minister has said we don't have the power to do anything about this. And I think that flies in the face of examples across this province. Most provinces in Canada have offered some kind of relief to their citizens to help them weather this storm. And ours has done very, very little. So one of the things that we have suggested is that their targeted relief programs, which include the heating assistance rebate, the seniors care grant, they need to raise the thresholds and they need to raise the amounts. So the heating assistance rebate program is $200. That pays to fill a tenth of an oil tank right now. It's not enough. And you're not eligible for it if you're working, basically. If you are a working family, you're not eligible for any assistance. And so we heard, and I think in the Chronicle Herald was an article about Josh Crowley, who his wife's an LPN, he works, but they just can't afford the necessities of life. And that is true increasingly for so many people. So they need to index those programs. They haven't raised the thresholds of who's eligible, despite inflation pushing everything up. Those thresholds haven't raised. Same with income assistance. That's not indexed to inflation as it is in some other provinces. So they need to index those support programs. And the government has said they're looking at doing that after a lot of pressure. So we were happy to hear that on the last day of the session. We have called for a freezing of co-pays for the pharmacare programs that the province runs. So the province has a family pharmacare and a seniors pharmacare. Feed Nova Scotia tells us that 50% of their respondents surveyed say that they choose between food and medicine in any given month. They choose between food and medicine. And this is in the middle of a healthcare crisis. So what better upstream intervention than people just taking their meds if they have them, right? The government has the power to do this. They could freeze those premiums and make sure that people don't have to make those terrible choices. And we've also suggested, as we did in the summer, direct support. PEI has done it, Newfoundland has done it, Quebec has done it. Across the province, we have seen provinces provide targeted support to people in their provinces to weather the storm, particularly as winter is coming, particularly as the cost of, heating oil has skyrocketed, and in the context of a windfall from government on the increase in gas prices. So when that price goes through the roof, so does the tax collected. And the provincial portion of that tax could do a lot to help Nova Scotians who are struggling right now.
Yeah, the tax on tax. I talked about that with, I can't tell you, many ministers in many different governments over the last number of years. The revenue that comes in is obviously attractive. I guess to just put a cap on this conversation, to go back to something we chatted about briefly before we started this conversation, was that the struggle to find people to run for municipal office, for provincial office, and sometimes even for federal office, and in many jurisdictions. And part of that, I think, is the way people are treated in the job, but more so, there's a lack of faith or confidence in systems, in governments, in institutions. That's all coming into question, and people wonder, is it really working? Claudia Chender is a leader of an opposition party in a legislature in Canada. Is the system working? Is it working to the benefit of the people who need the help the most?
I think in the balance of all things, I would say yes, insofar as this system, we have free and fair elections, and the, outcome of those elections is accepted. And then the people who form a government are allowed to govern. So especially as we look south of the border, I think we have to be thankful of our democratic system. And, I think what's so important in the cynicism around politics, which has been around for a long time, it's not new, is that decisions still get made. And so, one of my big impulses or influences when I decided to run was a professor I had who was really encouraging all of us way back then in university to run for political office. Took me a long time. And what he always said is, it doesn't matter if you think it works. It doesn't matter if you think it's cool. It doesn't matter if it's the profession you think you want. The decisions still get made there. And so it's important that if you think you can contribute to the conversation, that you should try to show up at that table. And I've really taken that to heart. And that is still true. The decisions still do get made. A lot of decisions also get made in back rooms. And that is why we are so concerned about the kind of narrowing of outside voices and independent bodies that we are seeing with this government. But nonetheless, we have a governance structure that needs a lot of reform, that could get a lot better. And that's one of the reasons that I'm inspired to be here, is because I think Nova Scotians deserve the best government that they can have. And, when I talk to people around the province, and when I talk to them about running, because now that I'm the leader of the party, I have to talk to people about that. it's actually really exciting because people want to contribute to making their community a better place. And I know you see that, Sheldon, as a volunteer in your own community. It brings a tremendous amount of value to people to know that they can impact the lives of their friends and families and communities and the people around them. And Nova Scotia is a small enough place that we still see the impact of that. And we have to hold on to that. And so, I think politics is important. And I think what happens in the political arena is important and frustrating. But, of course, we do all this work on behalf of the people of Nova Scotia, and we're proud to do it.
She is the elected representative, the member of the Legislative Assembly for Dartmouth South. And she's also the leader of Nova Scotia's New Democratic Party, a politician on the rise, as it was posted not too long ago in another media outlet. Claudia Chender, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Sheldon.